Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is our wine tasting, Grape to Glass, virtual tasting called You Had Me at Merlot and Malbec. And we are going to be tasting two Merlots tonight, and I also have a special new release, the Malbec, which will be released later on this month. But I wanted to take this time and opportunity, even though our Malbec was delayed in port, to give you all the nitty gritty on this wine when it launches, because I know everybody's going to be off and running and into the holidays. And I've got a special presentation introducing our latest for our international collection at One Hope. If you don't know me, I'm Mari, Director of Wine at One Hope. I'm a winemaker that's passionate about sharing our wines which make an impact. And today I will be presenting a couple of my favorite wines. Now, if you've been watching this long enough, you know that every time I say that, and that's just because I love so many of our wines. But Merlot has a special place in many winemakers' hearts, and it's always a really rare find to find a delicious Merlot. And our core collection Merlot is one of my favorite in our California core collection. So I'm really excited to be tasting that with you guys tonight, as well as I have our 2015 Merlot and our new international Malbec. You might be asking, how did I get that? Well, I had them send it to me specifically from Argentina. I only got 3 bottles, so I could taste it with you tonight. So take your notes, and this recording will be up in VIA University along with the presentation slides for your reference. I'd love to hear from you in the chat box. So when I get a chance to take a pause, I'll answer any of your questions that pop up tonight. This is really meant to be interactive and exciting. So just to recap, I've got our core collection Merlot, I have our new Argentina Malbec, and I have our Napa Valley Reserve Merlot. So that is what we'll be tasting tonight. Hello, Dream Crew. I know you guys are having a great time and getting ready to kick off the holidays in Colorado. I'm looking out at you thinking, wow, technology is really super cool. This is cool that I can be here with you guys. So thanks for inviting me to your party. All right, for any of you who are just joining me, welcome to You Had Me at Merlot and Malbec, and I'm Mari. So I just wanted to kick off tonight as we take these wines from grape to glass with a little bit about why we selected Merlot and Malbec together. And in order to do that, I'm going to take you to our first slide, which is here. And it all started in Bordeaux, in what we call the old world, okay? In Bordeaux, France, which you know is where Bordeaux reds come from, and a Bordeaux white made of Sauvignon Blanc. Bordeaux is the origin of these 5, and so we talk about the Bordeaux 5. Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. So those are the 5 varieties that are legally authorized to be grown in Bordeaux and called Bordeaux. So if you pick up a wine and it says Bordeaux and you're just really not sure what it is, you're guaranteed it's going to be some combination of those 5. Now that is just where this party is getting started, right? Because now what we're talking about tonight are wines from what we call the New World. Where is the New World? Well, the New World, of course, is California wine and the Napa Valley. And we've talked a lot about the Napa Valley, and I just wanted to remind you of a few things about Napa Valley, or if you're new to Napa Valley, how special Napa actually is before I go into our new region in Argentina, also the New World. So did anybody know that Napa Valley has only 4% of the entire wine production grown in California is grown in Napa Valley? It's a very small region with big accolades, right? We grow amazing grapes in the Napa Valley. And why is that? Well, it's a really small valley, only about 30 miles long, which has the perfect temperature, which is a Mediterranean climate that only 2% of our planet enjoys. Only 2% of the ground on our planet is enjoyed in what we call a Mediterranean climate. So pretty impressive. Now, of that, just so you can get a gauge, because you've been in the store and you've seen Napa Valley and you kind of think, well, Napa Valley, there's a lot of wine from Napa Valley, right? Well, like I said, there's only 4% of all the wine in California that's actually made in Napa Valley. And did you know that when we started over here with Bordeaux, the old world, Napa Valley is 1/6 the size of Bordeaux. So we grow by vineyard acres, in definition of vineyard acres, 1/6 the amount of volume in Bordeaux. So in Europe, it's much more likely that you will see a Bordeaux than a wine from Napa Valley. And we like to talk about this because as I got the question earlier today and I answered it on Q&A, what is a reserve wine? Well, a reserve wine is at One Hope is from a smaller, tighter appellation that's more rare and more special. And more rare would be something like Napa Valley, right? 4% of all of California's production. So we make excellent wines in our California Core Collection, which we source from throughout California, very special vineyards in collaboration with Rob Mondavi Jr. And then we have a reserve collection where these wines are lower in production, they're smaller volumes. We take a higher sort of care and attention to those wines because they're very rare and very special. And like I said, they're 1/6 the size of Bordeaux. So that was the old world. That's where things got started. And in 1981, Napa Valley became the very first American viticultural area, AVA, that's what we call it. Napa Valley was geographically defined as an AVA where quality wine grapes came from. And that was our introduction to the New World. Now, since then, another New World region has popped up on the map, along with New Zealand and South Africa, and to a certain extent, Australia. We also have Argentina. Argentina is a really cool region, not in climate so much, but it's a really exciting region. It sits just on the western side. Mendoza Valley sits on the western side of the Andes. And where we source we've got a little map right here. So these are the Andes Mountains that you can see on my slide. And you can see where Mendoza, the town of Mendoza is. And down here in brown, you can see the Uco Valley. And the Uco Valley is the most prestigious part of Mendoza, where the highest quality grapes are grown. What is so special about this area and world-class Malbec? Well, I'll tell you that there's very little rainfall on this side. And for those of you in Colorado, you know why that is, right? Because most of you in Denver are on that eastern side. And this is the eastern side. Sorry, I stand corrected. I might have said western earlier, but I meant eastern side of the Andes. And so we don't get a lot of rainfall over there. It's very dry. So the soils are very well draining. They're at the base of the Andes, and they are 3,000 to 4,000 feet above sea level. So high elevation. And what that usually means is intensity of color. The soils are perfect, the weather is perfect, and the high elevation allows for an intense growing area that allows for intensely colored wines, perfumed wines, and very rich wines. So this is a really well-regarded area inside of Argentina, and that's why it's called or added to our reserve collection, because it's this smaller, tighter, more rare and prestigious area than maybe Argentina as a whole or just Mendoza. Okay, you'll also see wines from Argentina from the Maipo Valley, and you can see and reference that here on our map where that is. It's just a little further north. So we know as we go down south in the southern hemisphere, we get cooler temperatures. And we also have very little rainy days, so we have intense sun exposure. Intensity of sun and at that high elevation allows for color and tannins to accumulate, and also leaving a lot of really intense floral aromatics. So really excited to be introducing this new region to our international collection from really a world famous region known for producing Malbec. If you were on the Q&A earlier, you heard me talk about the little Russian stacking dolls. And I just wanted to talk about this again briefly for anybody that wasn't on that call. But you know the little dolls, and there's the largest doll, and then there's a smaller one inside that, and you open it up and it's more small, and then finally you get to the smallest little doll. Well, if you were to think about those dolls and our wines, you would start with the largest doll being our California Core Collection from California, where we source from really wonderful vineyards throughout the state to make our wines in a really special tasting profile. And then you would get smaller, and you might go to the Central Coast or the North Coast. And then you would just get a little bit smaller, and you might go to Napa Valley, or you might go to Edna Valley. And then you would go to the smallest doll, which would be to Estate 8, to the One Hope property where the Estate 8 wines are made, and they're single vineyard wines. That's the most rare and most unique and most special type of wine that you can find based on appellation, or what we call AVA, American Viticultural Area. So I just wanted to give that explanation because it was brought to me by our support team, and some of them operating out of Kiev, and they brought this analogy to me, and I thought it was wonderful and an absolutely fantastic way to show the difference between reserve wines in our collection. So just wanted to answer that for everybody tonight. So I know that there's a lot of parties going on, and you don't want to listen to me unless you've got a little wine in your glass. Am I right? So let's get this started. And we're going to start with our California Merlot. This is the 2014. I love this wine, and I'm going to go ahead and open it and show you some tips. Now, earlier, before we started, I did see a few people on, and they said they were going to open their wine Mari style. So I take that you guys have been learning a few tips on how to open a bottle of wine like a pro. So if you already know, open your bottle with me, and if you don't, stay tuned. First of all, we have what's called our foil or capsule on the top. And that can be a little distracting because we can't get to the cork through the capsule, or it's actually very difficult to do so. So what we have is a corkscrew here. This is very similar to the ones that we have at One Hope. And unfortunately, I just couldn't find mine because I leave them in all my purses and traveling bags. And then they get confiscated or lost. So I need some new ones in my stocking this year. But that's a good idea. I think that's a good stocking stuffer. So anyway, right here we have a blade, and I love the corkscrews that have a blade because I like to use this blade to get a nice smooth cut on the wine capsule itself. Often these are made of tin, or they can be made of another material that really works well with the blade. So I take the blade and I put it right here underneath the lip of the bottle where I can actually get a grip, and I go ahead and turn the bottle so that I'm just keeping that constant cut underneath. And then I pull up right there on the foil and voila, pop it off. Now, as you guys know, I have this sort of fetish for a clean looking bottle. So it's super clean and looks really nice on a table. But you also know, because many of you join me every month, that if it starts looking jagged or ragged or it doesn't work out that well, just rip the whole thing off because that's fine too, okay? So just want to have some fun and get to the cork, right? So you can also take the whole thing off if none of that works. Sometimes there's days when that just doesn't work out so well, right? So now I'm going to open this, and we've all experienced the million times where only half of the cork came out. Oh no, my corkscrew was in sideways and it was breaking apart. Everybody has a horror story about trying to get the cork out of a bottle, me included. So I want to show you one of my tips by using this corkscrew part. And you see the very end, and what the most important part is to get the very end of the corkscrew aligned with the center of the bottle and start there. So not going up and down, but actually getting the pointed part aligned with the center of the bottle, starting there and working into your cork. taking just that 1 second actually helps a lot. And then you can use this little rocking fulcrum to bring the cork up once and twice, and poof, you've got it. All right. I've got a quote on my cork. What does it say? I love these things. I have found that among its other benefits, giving liberates the soul of the giver. Ooh, I like that one. I like that one. It really does. And this is the season for giving. And what we're giving is so much more than just a glass of wine. But let's go ahead and pour one. All right. So when we're tasting wine, we're talking about how to taste wine and what should we use. Everybody starts off with what glass to use. And I use different glasses all the time. But for tonight's wines, I pulled them out of my cellar. It's probably about 55, 6, 7 degrees in there. And it's a cold night. The air temperature is pretty cool in my kitchen. And I wanted to kind of warm them up. So I chose a stemless glass, which will allow my hands to warm up the wine and allow the aromas to just pop out of the glass so that I can get to them. Because as we warm up the wine, we allow more flavors to and aromas to volatilize up to the top so we can get them with our nose. So go ahead and swirl your glass. Swirling is actually not just for wine snobs. It's for everybody. If you've got a great glass that you can really swirl in, what you're doing is allowing more of those aromatic components of the wine to come to the surface. So that when you smell the wine, which is most of your senses involved in wine tasting, actually, you can really appreciate it, enjoy it, and see what you like. So go ahead and smell this wine. And then the last part is to sip the wine. That's one of my favorite parts, right? I mean, who doesn't like sipping the wine? I always love coming back to this one. So when I'm really smelling this wine, I get a lot of bright raspberry and cherry, really pretty red fruit. And sometimes you might say, well, I don't get the cherry or the raspberry. But then go a little further and just say, how about red fruit? Does it smell like red fruit or black fruit? Do you even maybe get a little bit of plum flesh in there? I almost get a little bit of plum flesh from this 2014 right now. Super duper pretty. There's also some of the hints of the oak profile. So a little bit of French and American oak. You can get almost a little graham crackery crust and a spice component that also comes from the oak, and that's a baking spice almost. Really pretty aromas. And then a touch of vanilla. Everybody loves a little bit of vanilla, and it's really nice right here, a little nuance. Then when I taste this wine, I actually get a lot of structure, although for this 14 is really starting to smooth out and be really supple and just really seamless. But I taste this wine and I get the structure on my tongue. Something that says like, hey, I could have a piece of cheese and that might be a good combination with this. Or I could actually add one of my bigger dishes with this and it would be a really good accompaniment. I've got a question coming in on the chat box that said, Mari, have you always had a good nose to figure out the profile, or is it something you can learn and develop? Great question. It is definitely something that you can learn and develop. And the easiest way to do that is by having these parties, introducing yourself to wine, and to be honest, probably watching this recording by yourself in a really quiet area one evening and just kind of getting in touch with what you smell. Because so many of our social settings, which are wonderful, distract our senses from actually smelling and tasting the wine. So if I'm in a social setting, it's really hard for me to actually pinpoint the wine. And when I'm really making serious tasting notes or making blends, believe it or not, I'm in a really quiet, pretty sterile environment. But that isn't where we enjoy wine mostly. So I appreciate the fact that you can do what you can do. You enjoy the wine, and if you're able to sit by yourself in a quiet area at some point and really kind of smell the wine, then that is a really great opportunity. That, and probably, you know, some tasting workshops and tastings, you can definitely develop your palate. And you always want to go back to some kind of reference point. That's what really helps you. You reference something like, does this smell like my grandmother's like cherry pie? Or does this remind me of, you know, my grandfather's cigar box? Or does this remind me, in a white wine, it would be like of walking along a row of lilacs. I have one of those memories, and the lilac comes back to me. So it's based on the scent memory too that you develop throughout your whole life, and everyone has a different scent memory for their different experiences. But you can definitely learn, and that's what these tastings are for too, is to encourage you to really think about the wines and taste them and better communicate them to your guests and your friends and with us at One Home. So I love this California Merlot. It's really delicious, and I think it's going to be an amazing kickstart for the Thanksgiving holiday. It's certainly on my list of wonderful things to serve for the holiday. Did anybody get the seasonal supplement in one of their latest orders? It's a really good recipe in there. If you guys have the seasonal supplement, I know Gina has one right there. And there's a roasted carrot dish that's just to die for. There are a couple dishes with Merlot because both the Reserve and the California Merlot were in our wine club shipment, our quarterly wine club shipment. Did anybody get one of those? Yeah, our wine club is awesome. And this last wine club, our wine club right now for our fourth quarter, includes our California Merlot and our Reserve Merlot. So if you've got a wine shipment, you probably got these in your wine club. But there's also a seasonal supplement and a bunch of recipes, along with some special notes that I created to pair these wines this time of year. So I hope you guys are going to enjoy that, and I can't wait to hear more about what you think about our wine club. All right, so moving right along, we are going to talk about our Reserve Merlot because that's what you guys have. And I'm pouring the 2015, but if you're pouring the 2014, then that is equally as delicious. I had a comment today from somebody who said, I got my Reserve Merlot and there was a little card in it that said, best enjoyed in December. Has anybody gotten a little card with their latest Reserve shipments? Perfect. Well, this is an important part of what we do with our Reserve collection because we release them a little bit early for the holiday gifting season, and we really want people to best enjoy these wines maybe 3, 4, 5 to 6 months after we've bottled. And so with that, we want to make them available, but have the customers know that it's really best if you open it in a couple months. So if you did get one of those cards, then that's why. Now, I get a lot of questions about, can I decant a wine? I really want to decant the wines. Which wine would be best to decant? If you get one of those cards and you absolutely cannot wait to get your little paws on it, then you might have a good candidate to decant. You could decant that wine because decanting it or using an aerator with one of those products is going to allow the air to speed up the process at which it's ready to drink, or those attributes in the wine have just become softened and available for you. As winemakers, a lot of times when a wine is young or new or just released, we call it closed. It's really tight, and it's hard to bring out that flavor and that full complexity early on. But you can do that if you're aerating, and you can do that with a decanter. So I did not have my aerator tonight, and I didn't want to decant this bottle because it's so beautiful, but I did want to just take some time and swirl it a little bit more. And also in my stemless glass, I'm going to be warming it up. So a lot of swirling, a lot of warming it up, and I think it's going to be just right. So this is our reserve Napa Valley Merlot. And the difference that happens here when you taste something from a smaller region, a more rare and special region in the world, is obviously the quantity is much smaller. So we have a really special product that's, very low in quantity, but also our attention to detail becomes greater on these smaller production wines because that's how wine is made. So I wanted to take you guys through our red winemaking program so we can talk a little bit about what makes Merlot uniquely so special. And when we go through red winemaking, we first start with our red grapes, and those are crushed and destemmed. And then we take those red grapes and they ferment on the skins. So all the color from our red wines actually comes from the skins. There are only 2 grape varietals in the world that have red juice, and those are usually not used in wine. Oftentimes they're used for color, like a natural color in a candy or in a food product, because they're so intensely colored, and that's their sort of special feature. But all red wines are fermented on their skins, except for rosé, right? Rosé is red wines that are fermented off of their skins, just the juice. So it's pressed, and then that juice is fermented. So we take that and we ferment the wine, and that means that we take the sugar and convert it to alcohol. And during that process, we're carefully monitoring the wine, and we're really gauging the tannins. After we press the wine off of the skins and seeds, now we just have the wine itself. We leave the skins and seeds, and we just have the wine, and that's what we barrel down to very small oak barrels. And I wanted to talk a little bit about barrel aging and oak aging, because that's also an important part of our reserve collection, is the amount of time that the wine spends in French or American oak. In our Reserve Merlot, we're using exclusively French oak. In our California Merlot, we're using American and French. And that's why with the California, you get a little bit more vanilla. You get sometimes a little more toasted marshmallow, really pretty flavors that are really attributes of American oak, which is a different type of oak altogether grown in America than the type of oak grown in France for French barrels. So 2 really different types of oak used and originating from different countries. And that is really strictly a winemaking decision on which type of oak to use, is really which type of style you're looking for. But French oak tends to be quite expensive, and that is what we barrel down our Reserve Merlot into, is French oak. And there we leave it in French oak, aging for 20 months. 20 months, 20. So if we were to put this 2015 Merlot, so 2015 was the September or October that we harvested the grapes. Remember that on a vintaged wine, vintage dated, the date on the label is actually the year the grapes were harvested. So in 2015, we went to barrel with this wine in right about now, October, early November, and it was there until, do you know when? Summer 2017. So 20 months later, we bottle it, and then we release it to you, and that's why it's going to be perfect in about December, best enjoyed with your holiday season. So this is a really beautiful wine. Merlot is a really special wine, and it got a really bad rap after the movie Sideways, which I'm sure many of you have seen. And, they really discounted Merlot as being, at the time, it was actually quite popular. And I remember going to my very first job interview in the wine industry, and I was 20 and a half, maybe I was 21. And I think at the interview, I wasn't 21 yet, but I was going to be 21. And they said, what's your favorite wine? And I said, Merlot. Merlot is my favorite wine. And still to this day, Merlot is one of my favorite wines. It's just so rare and hard to find really delicious Merlot, really sought after by some of the best producers. And that's why I really love our California Merlot, and I also love this Napa Valley Merlot. It's just beautiful. So let's smell this one. So what happens when we start getting into reserve wines is that we actually start getting a real fruit intensity, a purity. This is like this really red raspberry, and there's some blueberry. So now we had red fruits in the California Core Merlot. We're moving to more of an intense red fruit and almost blue fruit, which means that we're getting the fruit riper. So just like you have a strawberry growing in your front yard or in your farm, you've all seen the development of a strawberry. And I bet a few of you have picked a strawberry once or twice before it was truly ripe. And I bet you've picked a strawberry when it was so perfectly ripe, it was like the best tasting thing you've ever had. Well, that's kind of similar process to what happens with grapes, that as we start growing and developing the grape and it starts becoming more and more ripe, we start getting more and more intense, rich flavors. And grapes can go from sort of a green, like bell pepper character to and kind of herbal and leafy. They don't really resemble much of a grape at all, to this really intense red fruit, and then even more specific red fruit and intensity. And then into blue fruits. If you're growing the grapes at this special place called Napa Valley, you can get into blue fruits because our season will actually go into a period of ripeness where you can just get very dark fruit. And that's super beautiful and really well expressed here with the accent of French oak, which to me has a little bit of that like fresh grated chocolate. So when you have like a tiramisu, oh my gosh, this weekend I had a tiramisu handmade by Stefan's wife. Oh my gosh, we're straight from Italy. I mean, it was to die for. And I can smell that fresh grated chocolate that was on top in this wine. Can anybody smell chocolate? Yeah, a couple of you, maybe. I see some nodding. Awesome. There's a lot of note taking there, Colorado. Let's have some fun. I see the dream crew is really studying. I'm happy. So anyway, this is just a beautiful expression. There's a lot going on. When I go back to this wine and smell it again and again, I get something new. I pick up something even more special. I pick up the roasted coffee that we talk about. I pick up some kind of like dried tobacco, like ripe dried tobacco. It's just a lot of really pretty fruit in here. And that's really a special wine, is when you can go back and smell over and over and enjoy something else. And these kind of wines also make really great addition to your Thanksgiving table, where people tend to sit for hours and hours and hours, and you can go back to the wine after you've sat down if you're hosting, or, you know, put away the leftovers, go back to that bottle of wine and see what else is being expressed. It's really fun to do that. So tasting this wine, the velvety texture is really a sign and symbol that the grapes that were grown got very ripe, so ripe that those seeds that we talked about when we ferment on the skins and seeds, the seeds even got ripe. And believe it or not, the seeds ripening is an important part of that tannin process, because those can actually get so ripe that we get a chocolatey kind of nutty component to them. And they really contribute in a positive way to the structure and complexity of the wine. Awesome. I've got a couple questions, but in the chat box, which I'm going to go to next. And first, I'm going to stop with our rosemary wine pairing. We've been pairing popcorns all year, and this one is our rosemary popcorn. It's super easy. It's just popcorn, a little grapeseed oil or olive oil. I like grapeseed oil because it has a little less flavor, and then a little bit of salt And then I've got some rosemary here from my garden. Luckily, that's a good sign when you've got something you need in your garden, right? I just chopped that up really small and then sprinkled it on the top. And actually, I was thinking tonight, it looks super festive, like the green sprinkle on top of the white. I feel like you could even do something for holiday hosting with this, where, you know, maybe you could add like some dried cherries or dried cranberries in there and make a little mix in one of those little small cups, you know, add a couple nuts, and you have like your own personalized mix to go with our reserved reds. So now that I'm actually thinking about that and saying it out loud, this is what I would do. This is what I might do. Is a little bit of this rosemary popcorn, and then go ahead and roast some nuts and maybe sprinkle them with a little brown sugar. So coat them with olive oil, sprinkle them with a little brown sugar and salt, and roast them. And then I would add a couple dried cherries, or I think better than cranberries, but I would add some dried cherries and just mix that all together in your own sort of sophisticated like mix, party mix, and then have that in, you know, just however you want to serve it. But I always get lots of questions too about pairing and making easy pairings, and that's one that would look super festive and pretty in the bowl, and you could just decorate it with some more rosemary sprigs and some cherries, and it would look Christmassy if you wanted a Christmassy one. Or I think you guys could all get creative too for other holidays, but just something fun and easy to think about. So when you want to pair food and wine, the best thing to do is take a sip of the wine, take a bite of the food, and then take a sip of the wine again. So let's do that. So the wine is so intensely fruited, and the flavor for me that's really penetrating is a lot of this chocolate. It's a little more earthy in flavor than some of those aromatics that I originally got. So now I'm gonna taste my rosemary popcorn, which is made with this herb that, you know, is very herbaceous, no pun intended, but actually has a really herbal, very green character to it that's like very evergreen. And I notice how that tastes, and then I'm going to take another sip of wine. Now, when I take a sip of the wine again, because I've paired it with the earthier flavors, I get a lot more fruit out of the wine. The fruit starts coming alive, and I get more of that red and blue fruit. And that's just the complement that happens when you take something with a lot of fruit and you pair it with something earthy, the fruit pops. If you took the fruit and you paired it with fruit, so I used all dried fruit or something like that to pair the wine with, like just the cranberries, then the wine would go more earthy. Does that make sense? And you get more of the chocolate out of the wine, which is also really fun. And you just get a different pairing. So that's a really fun thing to try if your food and wine pairing is take a sip of the wine, take a bite of the food, and then another sip of the wine. How's everybody doing out there? I'm gonna go to the chat box for a second before I introduce the Malbec. And do all the flavors come from the ripe grapes that are harvested, or are flavors added in some way? Thank you for asking this question. I get this question a lot, and I want to say that you know, grapes, including Cabernet, is actually called the noble grape. And grapes are so interesting and make wine over other fruits because they're actually so complex. And each different grape variety has its own flavors and whole tasting profile that we acknowledge on the back of our bottles. And so it's true that the main ingredient in wine is grapes. And so that is where all the flavor comes from. And we actually add flavors per se only by way of winemaking style. So just like my red winemaking template up here has. We introduce flavors in different types of barrels that we're aging them in. So there's different spices, different toasting levels, and different oak types all together, different forests. And then we blend the wine and bottle it for a really rich color, soft, supple tannins. And in that blending process, we sort of blend the flavors to match our style. So winemaking is a creative process that allows you to really bring out the flavors that are naturally occurring in the grapes, from the grapes themselves and from the fermentation and aging process. So great question. All right, I've been talking a lot, so I'm gonna have to scoot along here. And we're gonna move on to our new launch. First stop, I'm gonna come here to these flavor descriptors that we've been using. And when I say baking spices, you can think of nutmeg and cardamom, cinnamon, all those really beautiful clove, allspice, all of those spices used in baking this time of year. We've got cherries. We talk about cherry and dried cherry and black cherry and red cherry. We've got candied raspberries in our California Merlot, the black cherries and vanilla, like the vanilla bean. And for those of you who do want to get better at smelling wine or tasting or identifying flavors, you can actually do that right in your own kitchen by just opening up your spice box and giving yourself a reference to a lot of those smells. And that gives you that, like I said, reference point to go back and find those things in wine. And it can be really fun. If any of you were at Crush, our annual conference this last summer, you got to experience that in our sensory station. Anybody of you guys remember the sensory station with the aromas? And they were all blind and you got to go, what is that? What is that? Oh, it's honeysuckle. What is that? What is that? Oh, okay, yeah, that's vanilla. Why did I think it was marshmallow? Or, you know, really fun to identify those flavors. So don't want to forget that. So to go back to our two wines, we did a good job, I think, comparing the two wines, the ways that we make the wines and how those are different, why a reserve is a reserve, the process that it goes through, and the fact that it's from this small, unique region that makes it rare and special. And that's how we treat it in our winemaking process and aging. So now I want to go to our new launch. And I'm very sorry that you guys do not have this in front of you, but I really wanted to talk about it because it's coming out at the end of the month. And this is our 2016 Uco Valley Malbec from Argentina. Now, I've got one of these pour spouts on the Argentina Malbec tonight because I actually love these things. And I wanted to demo them because I think people have been playing around with them. And sometimes they're kind of hard to figure out and just leave you feeling frustrated, but there's a really good purpose for them. So what you do is you want to get it really tight onto your bottle. So really press it down on your bottle if you get some of these. And somebody asked for me to show this bottle closer, so I'm going to. It's a Reserve Collection Argentina Malbec. So then what you want to do is just go all the way up for your 1 ounce pour, okay? So then if you wanted, okay, well, I want 2 ounces, then there you go, okay? So you can't really just pour it from the side. You have to go all the way up, kind of like a bartender would do. And I know it seems a little bit weird at first, but it's a really good way to gauge how much wine you would need at a party. Excuse me. And also just to have everybody taste the wines responsibly because, you know, if you're pouring 6 wines, that's a lot of wine. And so these pourers actually do, I think, a pretty good job of just pouring the right amount of wine for a taste. And then if somebody needs another taste, they could have another taste. But I wanted to show you how those work so everybody could see that. And we've used them a lot in different tasting rooms and places that I've worked. And so looking forward to your feedback on those too. So this Malbec is super duper dark in color. As I talked about earlier, this is from the Uco Valley. It's grown at high elevation on the eastern side of the Andes Mountains. And you saw the pictures of those vineyards. I'm going to go back to that actually, because it's pretty incredible. I mean, that's really what the region looks like. So this region, you know, became very well known for Malbec, one of the Bordeaux 5, and became sort of the Malbec hotspot of the world. And everyone started seeing Malbec, and people just fell in love with it because it's so intensely flavored. The tannins are present, but they're supple and soft and easy to drink, but very weighted and present. And it's also got this deep dark fruit and this brilliant floral note. And that's really common with high elevation vineyards, where they're cool climate in the way like growing at that high elevation is a little bit cooler. This is also south of Mendoza, so the temperature is cooler in that area, and very little rainfall, so very well draining soils allows you to have really rich, intense wines. So I won't torture you by tasting this for too long, but I do just want to say that it's got this really pretty black cherry and floral note. And when I say floral, it's like a violet or like a violet petal. It's really pretty. And it's almost like a Petit Verdot aroma or Petit Syrah. They're really dense, but then they have this like floral pop, this really brilliant, bright note that just makes them pop out of the glass. It's inky, and it's got some really nice red raspberry. Tasting the Malbec, it just coats your mouth with flavor. The flavor is so persistent. It's very, very intense, very black cherry, just like overwhelming, really beautiful fruit, and then a really silky finish that's just very present and kind of lingers. So if you wanted to pair this, you know, with the rosemary popcorn, you're really gonna see that fruit pop again, because you'll have this earthy note and the fruit is gonna just even jump out of the glass more. So beautiful, beautiful wine. It's a great addition to our reserve collection. It's going to add that bold wine that everybody's been wanting in that price point. Really pretty with dark fruit and intensity coming from a world-renowned region in Argentina, adding that to our reserve collection. So I know, Gina, I'm sorry. I just wanted to taste this. She's like, it's not fair. I just wanted to taste this with you guys so that you would know what to expect. I'm super excited for you to get this wine. It's beautiful. That's so mean, she says. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So moving on from our descriptors, I wanted to talk also about a couple food pairings that you could use these wines. And as I said, the wine club featured the California Merlot and our new reserve Merlot. And so we've got a really great seasonal supplement in the wine club that has 2 great recipes with our One Hope Kitchen products for both of those wines. And there's a lot of like really pretty earthy dishes that you can do with the Merlot that's going to make that fruit pop, just like we did with the rosemary. And a lot of our classic seasonal dishes during Thanksgiving are, you know, really about aromatic herbs. And so those wines will really pop with those kind of herbal flavors of the season. You know, that's really pretty. So keep that in mind. Really rich, savory dishes. All of these wines are really dry wines, and they have really soft, supple tannins, and that's just part of Merlot and Malbec together. That family has been used to blend with Cabernet to help kind of tame those tannins, and that's why they're one of the 5 of the Bordeaux 5 original grapes grown in Bordeaux to blend together to create a Bordeaux wine. So gorgeous. The acidity is balanced. They're not racy and acidic. They're really balanced wines that are just really supple and easy to enjoy. So I wanted to go over to some of our keywords and phrases that we use tonight. We talked about aging, especially with our reserve wines and the length of aging, and that's the time that we spend allowing the wine tannins to develop, resulting in the full, complex, and supple wines. We talked about tannins, and those really come from compounds found in the skin, stems, and seeds of the grapes, contributing to that structure, that velvety texture in the wine. We talked about Bordeaux, a wine growing region in France, growing Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Malbec, and Petit Verdot, and that's the Bordeaux 5. And then we have some wines from the New World. The Uco Valley is a key wine growing region of Mendoza, Argentina, producing distinctive Malbec at nearly 4,000 feet in elevation. Merlot is a red grape varietal, most notably used in Bordeaux wines, and it's added to blends for softness and freshness. Malbec is a red grape varietal native to Southwest France, but now a rising star amongst red wines made in Argentina. And we're bringing that to you guys now. And then, whoops, where'd you go? We talked a little bit about oak. We have French oak, which is a specific type of oak grown in forests throughout central France. And we have American oak, which is another type of oak. So they're both the Quercus family, but they have different scientific names. And this is grown in forests throughout the Midwest and Appalachian areas of the United States. It tends to be a little bit higher in lactones, what we call lactones. So it tends to be a great barrel to accentuate that vanilla sort of, in white wines, it can be a coconutty kind of character, really pretty toasted notes. And I wanted to give a shout out for a couple of our cause partners. Our 2015 California Merlot is partnered with our Cure Alzheimer's Fund. I watched a video about this earlier and just made me so proud of a lot of the partners that we use with our wines, where in the Cure Alzheimer's Fund, 100% of the proceeds from our impact go to the research that needs to be done. So the founders actually pay, the founders of Cure Alzheimer's Fund pay for all the overhead expenses, and then donations go purely to research to cure this disease. So really, really great sponsor and cause partner. And our 2016 Uco Valley Malbec is actually not going to N7. I think that's a typo on my slide. It actually goes to, that's what happened on my slide. I'm sorry. The Merlot is for the N7 and the Malbec goes to Cure Alzheimer's. So I'm sorry about that. That's a typo on my slide. The Malbec will be end Alzheimer's. I know you guys are excited about that. The Merlot is going to N7, which is really all about research, awareness, availability, and education for vaccines of the top 7 tropical global diseases. So a really great grassroots organization that's helping provide these vaccines for kids, and a really integral part of what we do as a company to change the game globally with cause partners like that. So I'm sorry about that. That's the Malbec being released is the Alzheimer's, and our Merlot is the N7. Yeah, got that right. And then, of course, our Napa Valley Merlot is for healthcare patients around the world, and just another awesome cause partner. So with that, I am signing off for you guys to answer any last questions that you might have before you go on with the rest of your evening. And I want to let you know that if you have any wine questions, please go to email me at wine@viaonehope.com. And thank you for uncorking change with me this evening. Together, we're making a difference. It's an exciting time of year, lots of impact to be made over the holidays. And I want to remind you to enjoy your wines responsibly and come visit next month, which is December 5th. So it's going to pop up soon. We're trying to get there before the holidays, just Tuesday, December 5th. And that will be Pop Fizz Feed Our Kids, featuring 3 sparkling wines to kick off the holiday hosting season. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We're featuring truffle salt popcorn. It's going to be really easy. Just grab your truffle salt and we will have so much fun together. Thank you for joining me. It's been a full hour. I could talk for another hour, but have a great evening. Enjoy, and thank you. Cheers.